Welcome everyone to our positive behavior and engagement through sport webinar this May. We are so excited that you can be here. I'm going to intro my amazing co-host, Q Banks, who's strength and conditioning at OSU. Q, say hi.
How you doing, everybody?
Yeah. And then I'm Samantha Bates. Q, I was going to let you intro me, but let's just get right to it. How about that tonight?
We're rolling.
Okay.
Let's do it.
You all know who I am, Dr. Samantha Bates, College of Social Work at OSU. Here's our game plan for tonight. Thrilled to be with you. We're going to discuss how athletic programs, both pro and collegiate, and translate that to high school sports settings, as most of you who jump on are from the high school sports setting, can set positive expectations for athletes to succeed both in sport and in life. We're going to talk about both programmatic and kind of interpersonal strategies that promote those positive behaviors, and also kind of how these folks hold athletes accountable and try to mitigate those instances of negative behavior. Again, classroom, community, kind of out on the sport field. And then we're going to probe a little bit here on how to be successful after sport. Many of us know that athletes are transitioning from college or high school and may not play at the pro level. So how can we get them ready? And then Stamp and Casey and Penny, we're going to push you a little bit about this social media. We haven't really talked about that yet in all of our webinars. And so how you coach and support in this new tech-driven world. And so our goal and the reason we chose this topic is sort of driven by the data that we've been collecting both in Ohio and nationally. And so we just completed at Ohio State the first ever national coach survey, myself and Dr. Anderson Butcher. And here's what we found. We didn't find a high level of confidence around some of these areas. So our guests are right in alignment with these different data points. So when we asked coaches, over 10,000 of them, how much of an impact have you had on your athletes developing life skills? Only 45% thought they were making a significant impact in this area. So Penny, we're going to hear more from you on this. Casey, only 42% felt like they were having an impact sort of on them persisting in educational settings, right? And then Stamp's on with us today, being a role model, navigating kind of how to be that person in the community that knows how they're going to transition, give back. Coaches also don't feel like they're making a big impact there as well. So we want to get these numbers up in Ohio, and we want to leverage the expertise on this panel. So Q, will you intro our first guest for us?
Absolutely. Ryan Stamper is entering his third season with the Jacksonville Jaguars in the NFL as the team's director of player assessment. He's involved in a variety of areas, including player evaluation, assessment, and culture development. Congrats on a great draft, by the way. Stan played at Florida. He's a Gator, where he served as a two-time captain, is a Jacksonville native, but to us, he's a Buckeye at heart. Spent 9 seasons with the Ohio State University football program, where he was promoted to assistant athletic director for player development in 2018. Stamper built the Real Life Wednesdays so many of y'all have heard about and helped players, again, develop internships, job shadowing opportunities, and other community service initiatives. In his 9 seasons with the Buckeyes, the team made 4 college football playoff appearances, and we're grateful to have you back here in Ohio sharing your knowledge, Stamp.
Yeah, thanks, Stamp, for being with us.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Next up is Penny Semaya. I got that right. Who is joining us from the University of Pittsburgh Athletic Department. He is the Career and Life Skills Coordinator for Student Athletes. He currently oversees daily operations around the Kathy and John Pelusi Family Life Skills Program. Amazing program. My dad talks so highly about it, where they're running workshops and resources are provided to assist student athletes with preparation for success in college and, of course, life after college. Under his leadership, Pitt has gained a national reputation for successful student athlete development. From 2014 to 2021, graduate student athletes were graduating athletes at a rate of 99% at the University of Pittsburgh, which is incredible. And much of his success is due to this innovative kind of programming and collaborations. A Utica, New York native, Semaya earned a full athletic scholarship to Pitt, where he was a 4-year letter winner on the Panthers football team, and was recently named the Orange Arrows Administrator of the Decade for his longtime support of their efforts. Also, there is a Mr. Penny Semaya Day, and we are so glad to have you with us, Penny. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
And our third panelist will be Casey King, joining us from The Ohio State University as the Senior Associate Athletics Director and Executive Director of SASO, serving as the Assistant Dean of of Undergraduate Studies and Associate Athletic Director at Florida State University. That's a mouthful. At Florida State, she oversaw the Student Athlete Academic Services Unit. She served as a sport administrator for the swimming and diving program and taught as an adjunct professor in the Department of Sport Management. She joined the staff of Florida State back in 2011, serving in many roles during her 10 years at that institution. Prior to arriving at Florida State, King worked as the academic coordinator for the football and volleyball programs at Duke University. King is an active member of the National Association of Academic and Student Athlete Development Professionals, where she has served on the board of directors since 2016. She's also a member of the Women's Leaders in College Sport, originally from Bexley, Ohio. King graduated from Wittenberg University in Springfield, Ohio, where she was a member of the field hockey program. She then earned her master's degree and PhD from Michigan State University. Thanks for joining us, Casey.
I just wanted to give you all the long titles possible, right?
Yeah, I mean, we're going to work it out. We're going to work it out. Appreciate it.
Oh my gosh, it's so true. Y'all's titles were like, blah, 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 blah. Q and I are like, we're just co-hosts. We're just here. All right, Q, let's kick it off. Let's hear a little bit about this amazing panel.
Yeah. So first question, I just want everybody to tell us a little bit about your background and your roles with Pitt Athletics, Sasso at OSU, and the Jacksonville Jaguars. So a little bit of background.
Let's kick it off. So Ryan Stamper, born in Jacksonville, Florida, which is why, my reasoning of coming back was to come home, to come to Jacksonville. I worked I worked at Ohio State for 9 years. And if I'm being quite honest with you, I probably wouldn't have left that place to go anywhere other than here. I mean, I love my time at Ohio State. I love working with, Coach Day, the whole staff that was there, Don, who works with Life Sports. I mean, it was amazing. But a little bit about me, grew up north side of Jacksonville, went to the University of Florida for college, played football there, was part of those, championship teams. And then, as soon as I got done playing football, the NFL didn't work out for me. So first thing you figure is what's next, and I figured myself being someone who, worked hard, did well in school, but even someone like that still had no idea what I wanted to do. So I got into law enforcement. A lot of people don't know that. I was a police officer in Titusville, Florida, did that for about 1.5 years. And then from there, because of my relationship with Coach Meyer, he hired me at Ohio State. And that's why I was so passionate about the Real Life Wednesday program, because there were so many athletes at the time who were like Ryan Stamper, played football, graduated, was hard workers, made good grades, but still had no idea what they wanted to do in life. And I just figured, as long as I can help it, at least the student athletes that I can touch or people that I can touch, which was at Ohio State at the time, as long as I was there, I didn't want that to be the case for them. I wanted them to make sure they knew what they wanted to do and was well equipped while they were in college playing football to be prepared for life after football. And then that took me on to the NFL, where I worked with, amazing athletes and amazing coaches and continuing my career and enjoying every minute of it.
Awesome.
Thanks, Stam.
I can totally hear your why in there, right? Like,
no question.
Totally tied to yourself, but then the trajectory is very awesome. All right, Penny, Casey, tell us about you, your why, kind of your roles.
Yeah, I'm happy to chime in on this one. So my why, simply put, I'm here with a mission to just serve. I subscribe to servant leadership. I actually am a product of the University of Pittsburgh. Came here when I was 17 years old. I'm 41 and I'm still in college. So it's been a blessing. I started the life skills program in 2005 when it was me and 2 interns. Now we're 10 full-time staff members, just all in life skills and alumni relations. And our mission is simple. Simple in saying, very difficult in doing, as a lot of folks on here know. What we do is our mission is to prepare student athletes for success in life today and success in life tomorrow. And how we do that, and I'll reflect on this a little more deeply, is we're going to meet our student athletes where they are. That means we're going to build relationships with them, get to know them. We're going to listen and hear them. And then we're going to help them identify where do they want to go? What are their dreams, their aspirations, their fears, the whole 9 yards. And then after that, we're going to go back to square one and help them build a plan to get there. It's super exciting. It's fun. That's why I never left, similar to you, Ryan. Not too many places will be able to pull me away from Pitt, but I'm a servant leader. This is my mission. So
that's awesome. That's great. Good framing. All right, Casey.
All right. So I serve as the person who oversees the academic and engagement areas of the student athlete life at Ohio State University across all 36 sports. So we have over 1,000 student athletes who we serve in our unit. We really focus on the student being successful in all areas of their life while they're in college. And, Penny is worrying about that piece after college. I'm worried about while they're here and making sure that they're ready for that transition time. And we really do see our students as individuals, even with over 1,000 student athletes. It's really important to meet those students where they are and to think about what excellence means for each student, because my why came from learning that not every student gets to college with the same preparation as everyone else. And so I believe that we have told these students that they are college students, and we have the responsibility to provide them with the support to prove that they are those college students. We see them at very vulnerable points in their career, and they don't always identify as being an academic person. They might see their athletic identity first. And so we want to make sure that we can highlight the positive in that area and to support them through that path to graduation and to the graduate degree or whatever it looks like in this current model of college athletics. But we absolutely are here to support them and meet those goals.
Yeah, I love it. All of you are saying something. You said kind of two things, like we're going to meet the athletes where they are. And then there's this individualization, right? And there's also sort of this, they're not all coming in with the same thing, which I think is really relevant as we're thinking about talking to Ohio high school coaches too, and kind of stamp, like you were saying, there maybe wasn't a plan after. Sometimes that exists around sport too. Hey, if I get there that first year and I tear my ACL, right? Like, what's the game plan? And so I think it's translational across pro and college, what you all said to a high school coach who's listening in. So this is a tough one. Talk to us about how you teach and model the core values of kind of positive behavior on a consistent basis within your programs. And that includes both on and off the field or the court, the mat, all the places. Who wants to go first?
I kick it off just from a professional level. The difference between NFL and college and high school right now is we draft the guys who we bring in, and one thing we look at is we call it Jags DNA. So Jags DNA is are they leaders, are they competitors, are they accountable? Just those things that just make you someone that we want to bring in here that can enhance the organization. So first, the players that we bring in, obviously the coaches that we bring in, the people you hire is actually important as well. And then the free agents, we got free agency. So it's just so many different avenues, but you bring in the right people who have the same goals. That's kind of our goal, to try to get those, get our organization where we want it to with the core values and stuff.
So Stamp, I'm going to push you on this. What if somebody gets drafted that doesn't kind of meet the mold, but y'all have these core values? How do you see your program kind of integrating them in? Like, what's the way that you bring them along for your core values?
So we have something that actually we're going through right now with our rookies. It's called the Rookie Readiness Program. It's similar to like a Real Life Wednesday, but it's way more enhanced. So every day during this time, which we're in OTAs, we bring in speakers to educate them on, finance, educate them on fame, to educate them on health, to educate them on just social media. I mean, literally everything possible. And the NFL actually does a lot to, invest in the players with that as well. So we do a lot of, of that. And then, obviously in the NFL, if guys aren't doing what you want them to do, you fine them, and if guys aren't being on time, guys aren't playing, guys get cut. So we just educate these players, they're making a lot of money. So we just try to make sure they're doing what they're supposed to do when they come here through the Rookie Readiness Program. And then after that, just monitoring how they are. And luckily with the DNA, with the guys we draft, we bring in the better people, prospects.
Yeah. I love that. So I heard you say we model, we bring in, it's all integrated into our program, the expectations around your finances, how you're going to handle all this fame that's being put on you. Like we're talking about it and we're talking about it all the way across. So when I'm thinking about how do I become a part of that JAG DNA, it's, oh, every day it's spoken to you about it, right? And these people come in and they represent the community and kind of show the life skills and leadership that you want those athletes to display. Okay, cool. All right, Penny or Casey, talk to us about how you teach and model those core values to get those good behaviors.
So, I mentioned that the college landscape has shifted a little bit. So I will tell you that if you're a first-year student, we have a very robust program, summer bridge with orientation, 6-8 weeks where we're working with brand new students to the institution to talk about what does academic misconduct look like? How do we make sure we avoid any plagiarism issues? How do we know, the rules and responsibilities that you have now that you're a college student? What does your brand look like at Ohio State? Name, image, and likeness, all of those important factors that are part of that onboarding process. And we really believe that if you identify potential barriers for students, then they understand how to approach those barriers better, then they won't just stop when they hit that marker, right? And so we really try to anticipate what those barriers look like and prepare them for success in that space. Now, with that landscape changing and a lot of transfer students, a lot of graduate students, with COVID extra years, we have students who are, 23, 24 years old, still playing their sport at the college level. So we've had to adjust a little bit in that space to think about what does that look like in terms of modeling what we expect from a student, because if you're getting them from a different institution who maybe had different standards than what Ohio State has, we need to make sure students understand, here's what your coach expects, here's what we expect. We are a team, we work together to get you to the point that we expect. And Ohio State does believe in excellence. We do believe in making sure that we are, modeling positive behavior and doing what you're expected to do in all aspects of your life. And sometimes that is a little bit of a shock to a system for a transfer student who maybe had a different expectation at another institution. So we do work with those students, but normally the timeline is a lot faster because sometimes you get a student and magically they're here and you have to figure out how to make sure that student knows what's going on very quickly. So we do that with a lot of individualized attention. Every transfer student who's at the undergraduate level and first year student has at least one meeting a week with a full-time staff member in Sasso. That's a big undertaking, but we believe that it is the way that we are successful and that we make sure that the students start off the right way and we're proactive rather than reactive to that academic climate of that student.
I love that. You said so many things. I think the first is don't make assumptions that they know what to do in the classroom. Teach it to them, right? Educate them. So don't come in with assumptions. Oh, my students know, that don't persisting and let's go through it at practice or during team meetings. So I'm not making assumptions. I liked that question of what is your brand? Like immediately I was like, I wonder what my brand is like. And then it's individualized, but I could also integrate in those OSU expectations too. So it's kind of a neat way to maybe meet them in the middle. And then you just said, we are reinforcing expectations by these multiple touch points and meetings with them. So those three things, don't make assumptions that they know how to persist in the educational setting or how to stay eligible. Ask them, what's your brand? Kind of tie that into your institution and then communicate expectations and make sure, I always say time is love, right? So spend that time, invest, show love. All right, Penny, what about y'all at Pitt? Tell us, how are you teaching and modeling these core values to get those good behaviors out of our athletes?
Well, going last, the benefit of that is a lot of what we do is exactly what Ryan and Casey said.
Yeah.
Right. You have a standard, you set that standard, you emphasize that standard when new student athletes, whether transfers or first years come in. We have courses for our first year transition programs, as well as our upper class transition student athletes. But when we get transfer students or new student athletes coming in, just like what Casey said earlier, meet them where they are. Mm-hmm. We're very fortunate to have the number of staff we do for student athlete development. We're totally separate from academic support. So we totally focus on their personal growth and development. So, for example, when we work with a graduate transfer, one of the first things I tell them is, listen, my expectations of you isn't to go to all of these first year type workshops. We're going to sit down, we're going to go through an assessment, We're going to look at your body of work that you're bringing with you. We're going to look at your academics. We're going to look at your experiences. We're going to look at your resume, and we're going to start building from exactly where your feet are right now. And same thing for first year students, right? I always tell them, like, when you're unsure, that's all right, because you're starting college, and now you get to open yourself up to all the different people and all the different resources. No one here knows you the way your family did or your school did before you came here. So this is a great time to start building relationships. And I always tell student athletes, just because you're my sport doesn't mean you have to stick with me. If you and I ain't jiving, that's all right. There's 9 other team members, so long as somebody's with you, because we're firm believers in telling you what you need to hear, not always what you want to hear. And sometimes with that embracing and enforcement, it can cause some tension in your first year. But that's the beauty of building relationships through time. Our upper class student athletes, they're the ones who help encourage that continuous support on our behalf.
Yeah. I love the Ted Lasso quote that says, to be your mentor, I have to first be your tour mentor. I love that, right? Because that's like kind of what you're saying. Like, yeah. I'm gonna kind of be on you to be able to mentor you. I kind of got to go across both, right? But Penny, you said some great things, like you're scaffolding the learning, right? So not everybody's starting at that same step, but maybe you assess and find out, hey, this athlete needs to be kind of here in their development. And then I love your communication of relationships are key, whether that's also within your life skill program. I think for coaches, that's a tough one, right? It may be you get along better with the assistant coach and maybe not the head coach, but I think we have to be humble and acknowledge that different learning styles, different personalities can help you get to that end goal, like start with the end in mind. And I love your humility of saying, it's all right if it's not me, but find somebody who can be your tour mentor and your mentor, right? Y'all gonna be quoting me on that one. Ted Lasso. All right, you give them their next question.
So we talked about standards and expectations. So in what ways do your programs kind of reward or acknowledge the positive behaviors that you kind of elevate in value?
Well, in the NFL, every year there's performance reviews. And obviously, when players are playing, press play, you're watching film and you see how they're producing on the field. So it's a very performance-based business. So, if guys are performing well on the field, handling their business, off the field, they get long contracts, extended contracts, more money. And then one thing I know Coach Peterson does a lot, he likes to acknowledge people, whether it's staff, whether it's players, in front of their peers. I think the biggest way to reward someone, everyone kind of wants that pat on the back. Everyone wants to know that they're doing a good job. And what better way to do that in front of everyone who's your peers, whether it's your coworkers, your teammates, everyone like that. So I think, that really hits home with a lot of these professional athletes. A guy like Trevor Lawrence, right? He, $40 million contract, but being recognized to the defense or being recognized by coaches or, getting a text from, a Hall of Fame with Tom Brady, hey, you did a great job. Those what really moves those guys. And, one thing we do on the coaching side, when you're doing a good job here, you kind of get rewarded with a lot of professional development. So, for example, last year I went on this trip called the NFL League of Leaders in San Francisco. So it's all of the minority people who each organization feel like is the next leader of the next generational leader. So, in Jacksonville, that's kind of how we reward players, staff. But, in NFL is money driven. So you do a good job, you get a lot of money. So.
Money talks. I hear you. Penny, Casey, how do you reward kind of those standards that your student athletes kind of exemplify?
Well, there was a Supreme Court case that allows us to provide some monetary support now for students that is tied to some academic funding. So our students, there is a mechanism for them to receive some funding. It's called Alston, if anyone is interested in researching that on their own time in the Supreme Court. But so there is that piece. And as Stamper said, there's different ways of acknowledging and honoring. We have quite a number of scholar athlete awards that student athletes might be up for, so that upper echelon student might get postgraduate scholarship money. We do a little gift if you've got a 3.0 for the year, things like that. But we also have a couple of awards that recognize students who maybe didn't start off as academically inclined and are able to sort of figure things out and become successful. And we try to honor that not everyone is going to be that upper echelon student, and that is okay. And there are other things that take from that time, and so trying to acknowledge that space as well. And then also we have our affinity groups like Global Buckeyes, or our Sheroes, which is students of color, female students of color, and groups like that we try to make sure that they have the support that they need to be successful and provide another space for student athletes. And so maybe that they'll be recognized in those groups, or we recognize those groups more largely, and provide that space for a student as well, because it's really important to think about how they're identifying at the institution and who their peers are, and allowing them space for that as well.
That's great.
Thank you.
Penny, you're up.
Yeah, without being repetitive again, just many of what Casey had mentioned, we do a lot of the same or similar programs, recognizing our student athletes through the different programs and resources. Well, kind of piggybacking off of a little bit of what Ryan mentioned, where we find a lot of fruit is in those subtle, almost unassuming ways of recognizing something positive in our student athletes. I'll give you a great example. We have a high performing young man on our football team, first round draft pick. But it was throughout his entire career at Pitt. It was those subtle high five and a smile, or, hey man, I heard you in class today. You really hit home on this point. And just like that repetitiveness of sinking into the spaces that shows them that they're more than an athlete.
Yeah.
Right. Like that's the emphasis. Let's highlight them at the times and the spaces where they're not always on that mega platform of performing as an athlete. So we highlight them in their student space, like, hey, I heard you gave that amazing speech, or this internship employer told me your interview was off the hook. Like really emphasizing and showing them and validating their successes in the spaces outside of their athletic performances. That's where we find a lot of fruit. And then we also, in our staff meetings, at the end of every staff meeting, we have what we call lollipops. What stories have we had that week that really emphasizes our why? We're here to serve our student athletes. And then we share that with each other. And then we send those same messages to their coaches or to their academic advisors or whoever's in their village of support. That's something that's important to us. It's not a structured way, but it's really intentional on the personal touch.
Yeah. I mean, you all just brought up such great things, like for the high school coach listening, right? So Penny, it's the subtle, small, make sure I know what's going on at school. How can I even 70% of coaches in Ohio are not educators. So how can I just talk to that counselor or that teacher and get one or two nuggets, even if it's a small victory of the day, right? So-and-so wasn't on their phone for 30 minutes. Hey, I heard in science, you hung in there. Today was mitochondria. You did it. I'm proud of you. Like those subtle, small moments, even as a high school athlete, to reinforce, hey, that's a good, like that focus, that dedication today was awesome, because that is transferable to life after sport. I love that you all talked about these, acknowledging them, whether it's subtle. Casey, you talked about these, like really, whether it's an affinity group or kind of most improved, like sometimes that's the person that's missed is the person that worked hard to get that D all the way up to that B, right? Who really put in the time. And then, Stamp, you're talking about money, but I'm sitting here thinking I could do a performance review with my high school student athletes and build in community, life skills. How are you doing in the classroom? How'd you do at sport? So again, it's not maybe Jags DNA, it's Buckeye DNA up here for us, but that performance review idea is a nice checkout, and then can set goals for the future. And Casey and Penny, to your point, I could make those individualized and maybe tied to an incentive that works for that athlete, because not everybody is also motivated by the same things. So I always love the question of what gets you going? What's it going to be? Because for me, Penny, it's that lollipop email. I get one happy email, I'm good for the week. Some people would be like, I hadn't checked my email in 3 weeks, so I missed it, and so it varies based on your athlete. Okay, here's the other side of the coin. So that's how you positively reinforce. We need to hear from each of you. How do we intervene? All right, so think about high school coaches on this call. How do you intervene to hold an athlete accountable? And, Stamp, you can't say fine them because we can't fine a high school student athlete. So I'm going to make you say something else. This could be academically, socially, in sport. How do we hold them accountable?
Well, I think first off, just making sure whatever your rules are, your core values are, whatever it is you have in your organization or your program, just make sure it's clear and concise and that your student athletes really understand. And then, if it's any issues and any accountability issues, have those direct conversations. I like to use the term, I'm not attacking you, I'm attacking your behavior, because we live in a world where everyone's so sensitive, and everyone feels like, it's just really hard to have direct conversation anymore. So while I'm talking, while I'm having that direct conversation, I'm also listening, and while I'm listening, I'm trying to be interested rather than being interesting, because when you're having conversation, a lot of people want to, you're thinking about the next thing you want to say rather than, listening to what this person has to say. Someone can really tell when you're listening or when you're really just, trying to attack them. So, after you have those direct conversations, you make sure your core values are clear. And then soon as, if that's not working, at least in the NFL, I know you say you don't want to hear it, but, you do use certain things like, finding them, put certain things in the contracts. A lot of guys get cut, just when they're not handling their business, So those are the things we use, but you got to make sure whatever your standards are in your organization, that is clear. Have those conversations, even when you're in meetings, position meetings, or, after team practice, just reiterate that, you know what I mean? Just so it's constantly ringing in their head. The more you have conversation, the more reps they're doing in their head, the more they're, actually likely to, follow the rules of the team and the standard and the culture of the organization or the program or the high school team or whatever.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, you said it as a therapist, we always say you're not a bad person. What you did was bad, and you can change that. You can make a different decision next time. So I love that. And I love this, don't try to be interested, not interesting. That's a good one. I think for coaches, so often we do need to listen. Why did you do that? Talk me through your logic. You can also catch some fallacies in there, some things that don't line up, and use that again to stay interested in them. I care about you. But yeah, putting up the guardrails, there are consequences. In the NFL, it's a fine, but it could be you're off the team because we can't just let everything go. So I love your interventions. They're very interpersonal. Thanks. Yeah. All right, Casey and Penny, how do we intervene to hold athletes accountable?
I'm happy to jump in on this one. Well, one, obviously working at an institution, we got our own protocols we need to check, right? Mm-hmm. From FERPA to HIPAA to responsible employee, through all those checks and balances, the one thing we always got to remember is that it's our student athletes' health and well-being, right? That's our top priority. It's not their performance, it's not their grades, it's their wellness, their health and well-being. So in checking to them, I love what Ryan said, be interested, not interesting. So we got to use our own effective listening skills and know and understand what our standards of operations are. One of the things I love to lean on is understanding who's their village. And I use that term very specifically. Who's their village of influence? Who are the people they connect with, they trust, their academic advisor, their position coach, their strength coach. Who are those people that we know has an influence in this young person's life? And knowing how to connect with them. So if I have a young person who's really, really difficult and acting up, and I know people are coming to me to connect with that young person, first thing I want to do is I want to sit down and listen to them. I want to hear their side of the story. I think it's also a blend of 3 different skills. One, facilitation skills, drawing information out of that young person. 2, intervention skills. How am I helping them understand exactly what they're saying and giving them a different lens or perspective of their own words. And then if you have to go into that space of that referral, that's the one key. Remember, we're not always there to solve every single issue. If we cannot solve it, we have to be comfortable enough to refer that young person to the right people who can help and support them. That's the one thing that I learned early in my career that I got caught up in, where I was trying to be everything without having necessarily the skills or the knowledge on how to help them effectively. So as I've gone through my career, I've learned, hey, let me check where I am in my skill sets and how far I can go with this young person to get them the support and help that they need. So that, I would say that's vital when you're ready to really check and enforce some standards with your young person.
Yeah, I love that. So we have a protocol in place before there's a challenge. Their health and well-being is centered at all times. And then I think this is such a big one we talk about in our mental health training: refer when it's above and beyond your level. Or I also think for all of us, we're typically caregivers. We typically are people. We want to be able to do everything for everybody, but then we get burnt out and resentful. And so that moment when it's like, should I send this email or not to help this athlete beyond? Would I want someone to do this for my own child, or would it be enabling, right? Like, you got to balance some of those and have people that check you too on your team, right? So that's good. All right, Casey, what about you? Intervene. Hold them accountable.
I'm thinking about it from the perspective of academics, because that is where a majority of my time is spent. And so, if I'm trying to stop a situation that I see is going to impact the student's ability to pass a course or be eligible for the next semester or whatever that next milestone is, I'm often talking to the coaches quite frequently, and we might pull a student from practice. That's sort of the ultimate. Okay, we've got to have sort of an impact on the student, and we got to make sure that they understand the severity of the situation. But that's like a last stitch effort of that. And all the way up to getting there, there's the communication with the student. We do a lot of group texts. So the student, the coach, myself, if the student works with a learning specialist, which is a person who would assist with the content and sort of this academic skill building that a student might have when they transition to Ohio State, we are all in the same text, because we do not need mom and dad or mom and mom playing against each other, trying to have this situation become something that it's not. And so I like to make sure that the version of the situation that I'm seeing and is known to all. And so that communication is really important in that space. The other piece that's really important for us as a support staff is that a coach is honoring whatever their team rules are or whatever their accountability expectations are, because otherwise the student will see how far they can push their boundaries. Sometimes I think of it like a toddler, and they're figuring out where the boundary is, and they found it, right? And so making sure that stays. Actually, as Stamp said, like, you have your core values, you have your expectations, and making sure that those are upheld, because I have definitely been in situations where a coach keeps giving, or it keeps changing where that line is, and it makes it really difficult to do your job when academics isn't always the fun. It's not always the place that people want to, have to spend more time. And so how can we make sure that that's streamlined a little bit better? And then the other piece is that I always try to make sure coaches are not using academics as a punishment. So that is the alternative that I honestly have not seen that at Ohio State ever, but I have at previous institutions and previous parts of my life where I've seen that academics is used as the punishment. And, I think that there's some cognitive space there that we could probably dive into that would tell you why that's not always the best option. Just as I don't think the athletic piece should be a punishment either, because that's actually something they want to do typically. So we have to think about other ways that we can get the student to buy into the process that we have, and why we think that this is the plan that we need to follow for that student to be successful.
Really, really good, Casey. You spoke a lot about where they spend a lot of their time. So this next question is for Stamp, really. In today's age of social media, and you're dealing with professionals, you're dealing with grown men that have a lot going on, they're juggling a lot. What one thing would you tell high school coaches as far as how to manage homework and schoolwork and social media? What does that look like for like your type of athletes?
You say managing homework and schoolwork and trying to be on Twitter and all of that at the same time.
you know the landscape.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not really a big fan of social media when it comes to a lot of things, but you kind of got to get used to it because it isn't going anywhere. So one thing I like to do is just give examples of ways that social media kind of affected people, you know what I mean, in the past. You learn from the future by going back to the past. So if you can get your phone and you can look and you can see how much time, I mean, your phone tells you weekly, like how much time you're using on social media. And if it's, time that's, hours and hours a week, hours and hours a day, I try to tell people, like, you can use that time doing something, productive. Like when I get on social media and I get on Instagram and I see someone and you just keep clicking and it's like 20 posts, like that takes time to be on your phone, look, like the post, repost the post. Like, can you imagine if you use that time on doing extra math homework, on doing extra, whatever it is. So that's just kind of what I, try to tell people when it comes to schoolwork. And, if you're making C's and D's, but, you on TikTok and you can do that TikTok dance better than the person that created the dance, like that's an issue, So just having constant conversation about that. And then also with these NFL guys, again, you go off of the past, and it's just plenty of examples. I mean, look at Ja Morant. Look at, just plenty of examples of guys tweeting things, posting things, and it's really affecting, just their brand. I know we talked about, Casey talked about brand. It's really affecting your brand. It's affecting your family. It's affecting, pretty much everything you're trying to do, and really for what? So people can look at you who don't know you, you don't know them, and try to get likes. So, I'm kind of old school when it comes to social media. I mean, I do have an Instagram, but, I try to, just educate these guys on like just how many times it's really affected guys. And when it comes to being professional, a lot of these players, I tell them, the NFL, professional sports, like it owes you nothing, but it can give you everything, So if you just handle your business and do right and you can get whatever you want to do, and social media used the wrong way can only affect that in a negative way. And again, I'm not saying social media is bad, but there are ways where it can be very distracting, and it can really affect you, whether it's in the classroom, on the football field, on the wrestling mat, on the basketball court. So just use best practices.
I like that. I think you said good things. Monitor yourself on there, your time, right? I would push an element further as I've done this work. Monitor your mood after, right? You feel better or worse about yourself after. For some people, it's a sense of community. It can actually make you feel really connected. For other people, it sparks that adolescent comparison game. Oh, wow, they're doing this. Oh, wow, they're doing that. If you feel worse, I always say scale it 1 to 10. You get off of there, it makes you feel 1 point, 2 point, lower that use. But yeah, I agree with you. It's just all about know your brand, and is what you're putting on social media your brand, or how someone you want to view your brand? Because we all look at everybody's stuff and perceive it differently. And I always say, am I going to like that I posted this a year later? Will older me like this stupid thing I thought was really important today? If not, which there's been some stuff, right? And I'm an adult, don't do it because it's not worth it. You may not like it in a year. So we're going to get to questions here in just a sec. I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to do sort of the shameless plug for Coach Beyond real quick while we're on there. But we do have a training in Ohio. There is new policy that coaches need to have a PBIS training, so a positive behavioral intervention and support training, which actually in everything you all talked about today. And so when we do this training out in the community with high school coaches, middle school coaches, we actually use the acronym DRIVE. Because it's never linear. You're taking left turns, right turns. You may have to come back and redefine expectations, but you all named this. So DRIVE, the D is define your expectations. Do that early. That is huge, right? Casey, Stamp, Penny, you all talked about that. Even just when you said JAG DNA, I was like, I want to be a part of the JAG DNA. Reward that positive behavior, subtle ways, institutionally, programmatically. right? Implement feedback when someone gets out of those guardrails. Make sure they know, again, the expectation. You might have to swerve back there. A big one for us right now in the high school space is make sure it's a safe environment. If you're seeing your athletes maybe get out of those expectations, who are they hanging out with? Is it safe? Are they being hazed or bullied or pressured into some of those behaviors? And if not, I kind of go back to Jim Tressel saying, yeah, you are who you associate with. And how can we help get that athlete with a better, group of people? And then the final thing we talk a lot with coaches about is evaluate their emotional response. So Stamp, you said this really well. Hypothetically, out at practice, NFL player blows up on another O lineman, right? I could institute a consequence right away, or I could have that individual conversation and figure out what's really going on, because anger is actually a secondary emotion. So there's one under there. And if we can meet our athletes where they are, this is going to help us have better behaviors, both on the court, field, mat, pitch, all the places that our high school coaches are. So shameless plug, if you're interested in this training for your coaches in the fall, we would love to come out, and you can schedule that on our Coach Beyond website. But now we're ready for questions from the audience. So Sid's going to run us through 15 minutes of great questions. So I will shut this down. And Sid, give us a good humdinger for the group.
Absolutely. So we'll just go ahead and open up with, I think y'all were starting to touch on this a little bit earlier about how sometimes you're setting behaviors for older players. And then, as younger players come into the team or into those spaces or into college, they start to learn from their peers as well. But how do y'all sort of create pro-social team norms where teammates are now holding one another accountable, and it's not just staff or coaches or athletic directors, who are holding them accountable?
I think that comes from ownership of the coaches. Once a guy or a girl has did everything from cultural standpoint, I think it's the coach's responsibility to give that player ownership. So certain things that a coach would do, have the player do it, and have the player own it, because at the end of the day in sports, the coach can only do so much, but the players are the ones playing. So sometimes the players have to lead themselves, manage themselves. And if you have that older player or that leader, like give that guy or girl ownership. And, just say if a coach is, telling you to do extra laps or whatever after practice, maybe that leader, does the extra laps and then everyone else follows. So that's what I would say, just give the players ownerships, but I think it have to come from the coaches.
Do you think the coaches have to give the players ownership? Like, could you give a specific example? Like, what could a high school coach give their players ownership over?
So for example, when you meet with players, and just say if, a coach, lay out his rules and everything that they want to do. And then now, giving the player ownership is, okay, you get the leader, you get a leadership committee, and that leadership committee amongst the team can start making different rules. Okay, well, coach, this is what we want to wear before games, or, this is what we want to, this is our dress for the game. Let the players pick the uniform for the game, or let the players pick the music in the locker room, or let the players, just when it comes to a program, giving the player ownership is let the players drive how the program is going to be ran, led by the coaches. I'm not saying, let it be, the players do everything, but just give them ownership in certain things in the program so they can feel like it's theirs.
Yeah, I love that. And you're like having them buy in because they're part of it. They're guiding the culture, they know the values, and now they're guiding how those values look on their team. I love that. Penny and Casey, any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I'd love to chime in. Ryan, great structure, great format. If I were to add a couple layers to that, I'd also recommend assessing your team as a whole and look to see who has influence. And I'm going to define leadership as influence, John C. Maxwell. We also need to recognize influence could go either way, right? We all want everyone going the one direction of influence, but we also know there's some influential people who are going this way. My recommendation, and we've done this at Pitt through a leadership academy, is to identify those with influence and then getting them in the same direction, and then you'll see the whole team come. It's a beautiful thing to witness. It's not always easy, but the key is what we mentioned earlier. Are we listening to our student athletes? And Ryan, I'm using that, man. Be interested, not just interesting. That is a pearl of wisdom, brother. I will never forget. So thank you for that. So yeah, like when your students recognize that you care deeply about them in those subtle ways, then those who are influencing down a different path than what you're looking for, they'll all of a sudden be more willing to go in the direction you're recommending. And then once you get that small influential population going in that direction, you'll see everyone turn that way.
That's awesome. Casey, yeah, I saw you trying to chime in.
I mean, I can chime in. I think the one thing to remember is that a lot of times athletes are goal oriented. And so if we can translate that goal orientation into other areas within, whether it's within the team, whether it's within academics, whether it's within whatever we're attempting to do. So if we want that modeled behavior from the older students to the younger students, think about that goal orientation and how we can tap into that for our students to have that positive environment and model that behavior, because that really does translate to all aspects, not only of sport, but of their life. And so when you can utilize that space and utilize the way that student athletes are already thinking in that context, you can really get them to take on and model behaviors that maybe they don't even realize they have from that goal orientation.
I love that too. Yeah. And I totally get that. If I have a goal or something that I can check box it off, I'm like way more likely to do it just for the satisfaction of checking it off at the end. And, Penny, I loved what you were saying too. We have one of our school district partners out at Akron. They have a leadership group of student athletes that they bring together from across the school districts, across their district. And they've identified, a couple of players from different grades, not just, your older players, but also your first years and on up. And they bring them together for these leadership seminars. And then they're having them make decisions at their schools and sort of learn how to be leaders and build this culture and build community within their schools as well. So I feel like what you shared is totally applicable here in Ohio as well. And I guess, wanted to also ask y'all about, as you sort of reflect back, all of you've had, you have success in your careers now working with student athletes, but you were also all student athletes at one point. And if you think back on your high school coaches and how they, motivated you all or sort of promoted these certain behaviors that they wanted to see that have brought you all so much success in your life, like what are those things that they did when they didn't have, the incentives of being in college and the awards, or maybe there were the high school awards? Like, what did that look like for y'all back then? And what were some of the things that really influenced you?
Are you going, Casey? I would say, my coaches growing up, one thing that really influenced me was just the passion from the coaches. Like when you're talking about high school coaches, like they're not really making any money. You know what I mean? I'm working in the NFL right now and then working in college. I mean, these coaches getting paid crazy right now. But those guys were the most passionate about, the student success. I mean, how many stories do you hear about high school coaches who, when I was at Ohio State and even now, like the high school coach raised the player, like the player was that's pretty much was his parent, so just coming up through my times, high school coaches, Pop Warner coaches, those guys, it's really coming from the heart. Like they really care. Like you want to see a coach that care, like those guys really care, picking you up in the morning, taking you to practice, doing stuff without, and it's all for the love of the game. So, and to me, the one thing that I noticed about coaches that were young and cared in high school and Pop Warner were they were the most honest, because once you start getting paid and it's about depth charts and it's about recruiting and it's about this and it's about that, sometimes you go to them, and we had those conversations about direct conversation, and it's really hard to get that from coaches like that. But the high school coaches were the ones that were the most honest, the ones that were the most direct, because sometimes guys, players, girls, whatever, they just want to know the truth. And I just feel like now it's kind of hard because, people are, sensitive, and it's, hard to have those hard conversations. But that's one thing I really respected by high school coaches when I was coming up, just that accountability, that respect, when they really was just doing it for the love of it.
So my answer is slightly different, but it was really important that we had fun. I don't think there are a lot of professional field hockey players out there in the world, so that was never a goal of mine. But I played field hockey because I loved it and because it was fun. And the coaches that I had modeled how much fun you could have in that team atmosphere. And that was really important to me as a player. I would not have wanted to keep showing up if that wasn't something that was created as an environment that you wanted to be in, a positive environment that you wanted to be in. And so, I even find myself now trying to find team aspects of things because pickup field hockey also does not happen. So, I have a run group because to me, being in that team atmosphere and having that celebration of the work that you're doing is so important. And that was modeled by my high school coaches. And actually, I had a different coach every single year of high school and every single year of college. So it was complicated to say the least, but being able to have people who cared about the development of us as people mattered. And the other thing I think with this generation especially is genuine, approach matters. They're going to call you out and they're going to know if you're not real with them. And so I think that, I don't need a whole bunch of smoke. I like right to the point and let's go, let's have fun with this and let's win this game. But your students are going to know if you're not genuine and if you're just there for that paycheck stamp, right? And so they're going to call you on it. And it's important to have that as a positive environment in that space where you actually want to be there and care.
I love that one, Casey. That was phenomenal. I've been sharing this specific quote. It's a long, or really statement. But we look at the 5 generations that are alive right now, right? The 3 oldest generations grew up with a term called "keep up with the Joneses." The millennial generation were keeping up with the Kardashians. This generation, keep up with me. Like, that's the mindset that I recognize the most. And when I say that, I mean that both with love and adaptation, right? Hearing our student athletes, keeping it 100 with them, keeping it real with them, like Casey just said. And then going back to what Ryan said, like, they're passionate. The high school coaches, like, one of the things that my high school coach did for me was he trusted me. That was like, and I still to this day, still don't want to let him down. Talk to him at least every couple months. That is so important because that's such an impressionable age, time frame, and you all are that young person's everything that they're passionate about, especially in the sport, right? So I hope you recognize that. I know many of you do, but that carries on so far. And then you're the one that they're going to be comparing all their coaches to. Right? All their college coach, their position coach, their trainer. Like, well, man, y'all laid a foundation. So that foundation rooted in trust will help carry that young person so much further.
Oh my gosh, y'all are just dropping nuggets. Like, be honest, keep it real. I got the keeping up with the Joneses. I'm going to do it on my finger, keeping up with our Kardashians and keep up with me. That, Penny, is like also the quote of this. People are asking for the transcripts, right? Because they want to know exactly what y'all are saying. So real quick, for everybody on who was able to join, if you are interested in a CEU, please complete our brief evaluation here. You can grab it on a QR code and Sid will drop it in the chat. We'll also email it out after. So if you're let me do this tomorrow, it's 8:00. We'd love your feedback. So please tell us who you are and how things went tonight. So I'll leave this up for just another second. So many amazing things shared tonight. Q, do you feel enlightened? I have a whole list of notes. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm still trying to write stuff down and fit it in between these lines. This has been great.
Yeah.
Appreciate y'all.
And incredible. So that was our last webinar for the fall. For this year. We did 8. We'll be back in fall of 23. We are gathering input right now on topics. So if you have something that really keeps coming up for your team, we would love to hear from this community. You can reach out to us also about scheduling a coach training at go.osu.edu/coachbeyond, or shoot us an email at coachbeyond@osu.edu. Casey, I think you had a specific chat in there, but for everybody, we're signing off. Thank you for being with us tonight. Q, great job. Penny, Casey, Stamp, can't thank you enough for your time. Sid, awesome job navigating the chat. We'll see you all in the fall.